Hello, everyone. My name is Beyond Baden. For those who don't know me, I'm one of the founders of First AML, and I'm really happy to be hosting this webinar today. It's a long session. I think we've got 2.5 hours in, so feel free to drop in, drop out on sections that you may find interesting, not interesting. I've talked to everyone in all these sessions, and all of them are really, really interesting. So if you have the stamina, please stick around. Otherwise, we will share some recordings after this. So today's webinar is on AML Tech Unpacked, Tools, Tactics, and Trends. I personally feel very passionate about this topic because I've seen it all. I've probably been involved in AML for the last sort of 15 years, 7 years in banking and finance before starting First AML, where I've seen probably some of the best technology rollouts in the world and some of the absolute worst technology rollouts in the world. So a lot to talk about on today's session. So on today's session, there'll be 4 segments. We've got Matt here from EY, who'll be our keynote, and we'll go into Matt's background in a bit. And from there, we're going to talk AML tech. What is it, what it does, and why you need it. Obviously, this assumes there is some understanding of AML and things like that. But if you've got questions along the way, please feel free to drop them into the chat. I'll be sort of asking or answering them along the way if we get some good questions in there. So our third session will be a panel discussion with industry experts. So we've got Kerry from the law sector, we've got Brendan from real estate, and Maddie from finance. So there's a lot of different industry expertise, different kinds of customer onboarding, different AML requirements, and they're going to talk a lot about the technology in that space. And then finally, we've got an open session, so an Ask Me Anything, where with all of our panelists, myself included, where you can just fire questions at us to do with technology, to do with AML, to do with process and development, because processes go really hand in hand with technology in this space. That's it for introductions and that sort of thing. So yeah, so we're going to start off with our first session today, which is a keynote on the future of AML technology. I'm joined by Matt Kennedy from EY. Matt is a director in EY's Australia's financial crime team and leads the Australian transaction monitoring pillar, as well as being EY's digital asset at risk lead for Australia. With 15 years experience across banking, gaming, digital assets, and more, he helps regulated entities build practical, tech-enabled AML CFT programs. Matt, a lot of experience, a lot of things that you've seen in the industry, so I'm really excited. But I'll kick it over to you on this.
Super, thanks very much, Bjorn. And yeah, as you said, yeah, probably stamina required for 2.5 hours talking AML, but I've spent 15 years talking AML and I'm still not bored. But I'm glad on the first session when everyone's kind of had their first coffee. Can I just check that everyone, you can see my presentation? Good.
Looks good.
Awesome. So yeah, it's really great to be here today. So as Bjorn said, my name is Matt. I'm here to share a few experiences from time working both across the UK and Australia over 15 years in financial crime and emerging technology. And for many years, the industries of the folks, most of the folks on this call, have operated outside of Australia's regulated AML regime, but now you're moving into its center. And with that comes obviously a set of new obligations, but probably a new vocabulary, new requirements from a compliance perspective, and possibly a new anxiety to wake up to, compliance anxiety, which is something maybe you never thought you would experience. But I'm here today to maybe start with a slightly different tack outside of the purely compliance work, because I'm here to talk about what I'm probably most passionate about, which is effective financial crime mitigation, and of course where technology can support that. Because technology, where used properly, can enable you to be really effective in identifying financial crime. But when not properly thought through, it can actually make you less effective. Because there is, as I always think of it, a world of difference between the act of doing KYC and actually truly knowing your customer. As I said in the slide, even if you know, you may not know. And we will come back to technology, but first I want to go through just a quick story. It begins with a luxury waterfront property in Brisbane. It's an overseas buyer. They make an offer, and it's a really good one, substantially above the asking price. The real estate agent is thrilled. The buyer purchased the property using 2 separate Trust companies raises an eyebrow, but it's not something necessarily completely outside of the norm. It does seem a bit overly complicated for this purchase, but the structures are clear and fees are paid. And accountants engaged to manage the books of this company. It comes to the time for payment, and the funds don't arrive in one wire transfer. They trickle in from multiple unrelated bank accounts, and the final payment arrives a day later via a remitter. The deal's done, everyone gets their commission and their fees, and everyone did a good job. Time to celebrate. Now, as the Austrac CEO Brendan Thomas highlighted in a recent speech, this exact type of scenario is a textbook example of how organised crime launders money in Australia. And it's actually a real example that he used. The money was proceeds from a criminal gang. And as he said at recent speech, the victims of these transactions and the way that the money is made come from some of the worst crimes around. Cybercrime, exploitation of people, including children, human trafficking. And I have recently spent a bit of time this year in a frontier market who we're working with, and have seen what some of these practices can do within a country and to its society. And they are created with a substantial human cost, and the implications really are widespread, and it needs to be stopped. So why were these behaviours not reported in the example that we had? Well, I'm kind of realistic that in the environment we've had to date, no one really has an incentive to understand this aspect of their customers, and consequently, they had no way of knowing. But that lends us to the question of, could everyone have known? Could the real estate agent have known when the offer came in sufficiently above market value? Well, they could have known, but to report, the staff would have needed to have been trained. They would have needed to have a mechanism to ask the questions at the right point in time. The lawyer or the accountant could have known when the client insisted on a complex corporate structure that didn't make economic sense given the activity that they were undertaking. But the mindset would have needed to be considering whether that complexity was for a business reason, or if actually the complexity itself was the business reason. And of course, everyone could have known when the payment arrived in multiple installments from different banks, from different countries, and under different names. But you would have needed to look at more than just receiving the funds. You would have needed to care about the source of the funds. Now, the failures in that example and many of the cases that I've seen over the last 15 years, they sometimes don't tell the story of failing to comply. These are failures in having a way to know what your risks are, and consequently know how they apply to your customers, and what I consider a core part of knowing your business. So if you take one thing away from today, I would ask that it would be your priority is building an effective AML program and not at compliance at the cost of all else. Now, why do I say this? Because many years of AML academics and dare I say consultants might have talked a lot about compliance being non-negotiable, and they might also have tried to sell you an AML program out of the box. There are a couple of reasons I say this. The first is that this is actually the new view of the regulator. Austrac are explicitly pivoting from their focus on box ticking compliance to effectiveness. And again, quoting another of Brendan's recent speeches, he stated this during the ACAM's address. He also gave some messaging about having patience with sectors and organizations who are trying to do the right thing, particularly those who are coming into the regulation afresh, but having less patience with those who are negligent, because where you are negligent, you are by definition going to be ineffective. And the second reason I say this is that this view of effectiveness, in my view, should be the single most important filter that you use when deciding where to invest in technology to support your program. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. The guiding question on tech deployment should be, will this make us more effective at identifying financial crime and stopping criminals and doing the things that we need to do, some of which are set out on the page? So let's talk about tech then. And using the lens of effectiveness, we can categorize the uses of technology in financial crime. foundational technology in financial crime, the way that I see it, is really about applying your defenses consistently and at scale. Technology is more scalable than people, and therefore there really are areas that lend well to the deployment of technology in order for you to spread your defense widely and consistently. And the most pertinent example of this, and kind of the most common, I'm sure what's had a lot of focus from those on this call, is around data collection at scale. It's often performed using a KYC platform. The true value of a KYC platform isn't just in data storage. Its effectiveness comes from gathering the same data points every time and codified according to the risks within your business, which you should understand deeply. It allows you to apply that risk logic and that risk assessment consistently. And the gathering of that data is really how then you can understand risk when your customers coming on board, but also understand risk on an ongoing basis where your customer is with you for the longer term. We do work with all kinds of organizations, and the consistent limitation of what they want to do and what they want to achieve really is data. I'd say the beneficial position of some of the more newly regulated industries is that a couple of things. Firstly, you are encountering this in an age of what I would say are kind of actually better platforms. You have nice modular platforms like our friends at AML, First AML. And you're also, at the moment, not expected to retrospectively gather data on existing customers. So essentially, you have a greenfield environment on which to build, which is a really great place to start. So another example of operationalizing, using technology to operationalize your program is in the deployment of your risk appetite. And the effectiveness of actually automatically triggering enhanced customer due diligence on your higher risk customers. And again, this isn't just about efficiency. This is a way to ensure your risk assessment is enforced without fail. But in order for that to make you effective, you really need to understand what the risks are and be confident that those are the right items to be deployed and that they remain relevant. There's also other basic interventions you can make around using technology to do things like deliver training. Obviously, where people are in different locations, technology is good at helping scalability across geographies in that way. Or things like automatically prompting points within your customer journey to consider risk. So, for example, when payments come in the example we gave, if there's specific points in the journey where your staff should actually consider what the risks and what the red flags are, and even have quick guides in order to reference what those risk flags are in real time. Again, examples of where technology is helping with scale deployment and consistency. There's a range of other applications of technology, and we've got kind of foundational here and also foundational, what I would call foundational plus, which is some of the kind of next level up technologies, things that are really kind of very well established in bigger organizations and organizations that have been regulated for a long time, but when you're building from the start are probably second stage. A lot of them can warrant an hour discussion on their own. I'm happy to kind of dip into those kind of during questions. And of course, we also need to then now face into the post-AI world. And where we have a world where generative AI models and agents can actually set their own work and do things like resolve PhD level physics problems. And actually, I recently can also actually, on the edge of discovering new facts about the universe, it seems logical that we can visualize agents who can execute some of the main financial crime activities. And the good news is they can. We don't actually really need to go very far beyond currently available capabilities to see a world where we have AI and agentic work performing most of the work within the financial crime value trade. And really where that's going to help effectiveness is surfacing risks in a faster and more bespoke way. A few of the agents that you have kind of on the flow here, which leads to the human on the right. And onboarding, you can have an agent that supports the consistent gathering of requested data working across a KYC platform and supporting verification. And in particular, in cases where you have exceptions from standard verification platforms, a lot of that work can be automated. And there are plenty of vendors that integrate that are able to start to help you with the verification piece, but there's always exceptions. And agents can be helpful in that aspect. At the same time, performing initial risk assessment from the moment a customer walks through the door, these types of technologies enable you to do that in a slightly more bespoke way. Moving on to the more kind of formal risk assessment piece, we're starting to see a world where agents can actually start to apply more bespoke segmentation for each of your customers. And that's really about building a picture for those customers of what normal behavior is for them, and thereby how risky they are. And that can carry through so you have a real picture of that customer on an ongoing basis, and elements of risk can be assessed more dynamically. And so on through to monitoring, investigation, and finally passing on to a human for decisioning when a threshold of risk has been breached. Again, is there anyone using these types of flows absolutely end to end? Not yet, but they are coming and the components are being built. And some are thinking of this as separate task-focused agents like we have in here. We've also seen more broad thinking around agents that get allocated specifically to a customer and then they operate end to end. Think of the guardian agent as a concept. So are they actually difficult to build, these types of this type of agentic technology and financial crime? Not really is the answer. You can actually build these fairly quickly. This is Victor, and Victor was built in 3 days. Victor uses Zapier, which can be an open source workflow technology, and then plugs into some of the well-known LLM models, Gemini, OpenAI. Victor receives an email to a Gmail inbox containing a transaction monitoring alert, and then extracts the data, organizes the data, investigates the case, decides the case, writes up the transaction, writes up the case, and makes a decision on transaction monitoring alerts, and does that process end to end, actually without human intervention. But what we have on the screen is one of Victor's investigation narratives from one of the easier cases he looked at over Christmas time. Second question is an agentic workforce in financial crime likely to be effective? Again, my conviction would be yes. I have a pretty strong hypothesis that an agentic workforce will and can be more effective than a lot of the current financial crime infrastructure within most regulated entities. When we reflect on the fact that less than 1% of the $2 trillion laundered annually is intercepted, it is not a particularly high benchmark to aim at. Are agentic workflows difficult to get right in a regulated organization? And this is where they can be, but it slightly depends where you're looking to deploy them. And what you really need in place in order to start to be successful in experimentation is, firstly, you need the right data gathered and accessible, because LLMs are trained on the open internet. They have the ability to map different points together and start to make determinations, but they're really making determinations on your data, and your data is what will determine your risk. Now, the second thing you need to kind of base up is then the right objective. So you really need to know what you're seeking to achieve. And this doesn't just apply for agentic work. It goes back to my comments about technology deployment in financial crime generally. Why are you looking at this technology? What is it going to help you achieve? And how will it make you more effective? If you have these first two, you can get pretty far up the chain on being a pretty efficient and effective financial crime capability. If you want to get further and further towards decisioning, you lean more into this area of oversight and governance. And this is really being able to demonstrate that these technologies, and whether it's agentic technologies or even more traditional models, are an effective way to identify financial crime. This gets really challenging for LLMs. One of the main reflections from developing Victor was the susceptibility to prompting of these LLM models. Even if you have ones that start to learn over time, it's very easy to introduce human bias in the decisioning part of it. So getting that kind of deployed end to end, difficult, but it is possible. And whilst I can't go into a huge amount of detail, we are starting to see it happen in existing industries. But we also, with this kind of more exciting piece of where technology is going, we also have to face into all manner of shortcuts that we can now take. Now generative capability exists. I've seen one of these kind of very recently live. I do a lot of work in large financial crime operations teams, and part of a lot of those teams is actually searching for negative news, and that's typically done open source. And Google has been a kind of pretty well established source to do that. Risk analysts are starting to be seduced by Google's new Gemini summary that appears at the top of the page when you type in Matt Kennedy in a Google string to surface negative news. Whilst it will come up with something that kind of reads pretty well, particularly copies and pastes well into a case narrative. Testing shows it's not actually particularly good at accurately assessing negative news hit. So is this person actually the person appearing in the hit, or the materiality? And that really is kind of the crux of the work. So it appears to be a kind of helpful shortcut for people, but it's actually really not helping the effective identification of risk. On the screen is then probably my least favorite shortcut, which is the ChatGPT AML program. This actually is what Gemini Canvas wrote for me. It's very much and I think it even kind of says this in its instructions: just fill in the blanks and you're ready to go. Put in your organization name. This view of information created by a model and not internalized by anyone in the organization is not going to help your organization understand or mitigate its risks. It will not make you effective. Please do not do it. There is a nuanced point here, though, that these engines are actually very good. And we were talking just before this call about how good they're becoming at certain capabilities, but are very good at improving the usability, accessibility, interpretability of what you have. And they're also increasingly good at research. And a lot of, particularly at the more scale end of financial crime detection, there's a lot of consolidation of risk literature and typologies that are identified globally. And the distillation and searching of that kind of work, again, is a good use case for these types of technologies. So it's not a kind of don't use them at all. But yeah, please try and avoid shortcuts. And the acid test for like what is a good use and what is a less good use remains the same. Will it help you to know? Will it help you to effectively mitigate financial crime risk? And then, just as we come from kind of the exciting to the shortcut, we also must actually take a look at the reality that these technologies are not only available to financial crime professionals. These technologies are available to criminals and are increasingly being used to more creatively attack. And generative AI, has really turbocharged a lot of that, and is frankly quite frightening tool to be in the kit bag of criminals. On one hand, it is supercharging the predicate offences. Predicate offences are those that generate illicit funds, so they are crimes that occur in the first place. And cyber attacks and fraud, things like scam emails being grammatically perfect and personalized, that's where we're really starting to see this take off. And also how they are able to survey kind of the relevance of new information and search across global use to understand where vulnerabilities exist. For example, where in particularly crypto companies are starting to wind up and people are looking for distribution payments, and they will be targeting those types of customers. But it's also a dangerous enabler for financial crime. And financial crime is not just about committing the initial crime, it's about hiding the money that's generated from the predicate offences. And the main risk here is really the speed and depth of the ability to create legitimate stories. Because, again, I come back to you having an understanding of your risk and really knowing your customer. Knowing your customer is about knowing all the attributes of that customer, what they do, how they got their money, and how they interact with you. And so the ability to create those types of backstories at scale, particularly quickly, is really quite challenging. This is more convincing deepfake IDs to full identification processes. It's about the creation of networks of fake websites. You can create a prompt-based application or website that appears to support a business in about 2.5 minutes using tools like Lovable Dev. It's about generating fake relationships and company hierarchies that kind of support that story, as well as reams of transactional history and fake invoices that seem to create a normal financial history either for an individual or for an organization. And all of those elements are designed to work together to fabricate a very convincing but completely false identity, source of wealth, or source of funds. It is complicating It's complicating things in the industry, and it's underscoring the importance of really being on top of your risk. And again, that focus on effectiveness. So, a couple of things just to kind of wrap up then, and a couple of predictions of where we'll go ahead. There's 100,000 newly regulated entities. I have pretty high conviction that despite the warnings, we will see the emergence of the ChatGPT AML program deployed probably at scale. In some ways, this is not really a new thing, as there are plenty of organizations out there now who will buy out-of-the-box AML documents. They tend to not know a huge amount about what their risks are, and they often fall foul of the regulator. We work with a lot of them because some of them get into hot water, and then we help them to uplift. Creating huge bodies of information, as I said, like it really does not help to understand risk better. I would really encourage folks not to do it. Absolutely get leverage from AI, but don't blindly use it to create compliance through documentation. A more broad kind of prediction is that as the regulatory approach evolves, many firms will react probably with fear of what that looks like in practice, and we already see it in existing regulated markets. They will start de-risking, and that means offboarding either entire sectors or customer groups that they deem too complex. That itself brings a bit of a societal challenge because you get sectors that become increasingly debanked, and some of those sectors are actually are sectors that either are highly beneficial for the economy and innovation, or they're very vulnerable sectors that really need access to the financial system. And so a lot, what we'll likely see is a lot of firms kind of see risk and retreat from those sectors. What I would say is like that can actually be an opportunity in itself, where you're able to more effectively understand those segments. Your ability to know and to know properly and to understand the risk and be able to effectively mitigate them can actually be a commercial differentiator, particularly if you're able to smartly apply technology and the right minds to do that. So in closing, let me just say it is an exciting time. There's probably a lot of information there, and my ask of everyone here, really is don't just do KYC, know your customer, use technology to do that, and don't be the firm that had no way of knowing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Matt. I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff that I learned from that as well. We've just got a couple of minutes, and I've just got one question that's come through that's quite good. So I'll just ask it to you now. So do you think that larger firms are best to build their own agents or wait for tech suppliers to embed them? What are the pros and cons? Obviously, as a tech supplier, I've got strong opinions about this, but I'll ask you first, and then I'll overlay on top of that.
Absolutely excellent question, and super relevant. Like I'm working through this with a bunch of clients at the moment, and what I can say from what is happening, particularly like the very big end of town, is a bit of a hybrid. So there are every large organization that we work with has its own capability to start to develop agents. The scope and focus of those agents ranges from things that save time, the kind of housekeeping end, all the way through to starting to look at actually assessing risk. And the sort of delineation I'd also make is between those is there are like more advanced kind of Azure ML stacks out there that require tech folks to start to develop on. But those organizations that use things like the Office 365 suite, the Copilot capabilities within there, there's actually kind of Copilot studios that some firms you can have kind of no code agent development, which puts the power kind of in the hands of the business people to do that. And from an architectural approach, the kind of key design requirement of all those is to make sure it will integrate into data that you have, integrate into the platforms that you have. And most of the platforms that come to market now as well in terms of kind of workflow and KYC gathering are API enabled, so you can plug in those capabilities. If you have that agility, like you don't need to place the bet as much, and you can be open to where great capabilities come from vendors, but you can also focus on building your own where it adds value.
Yeah, and I recall very acutely my time in banking. I would collect someone's ID, upload it to the system, and then 2 weeks later it would disappear. Very hard to build an agent on top of something like that if you don't have your core infrastructure set up correctly. So thank you so much for that, man. That was super interesting. And in the interest of time, it's 10 on the dot, so that's fantastic.